Okay, let's continue with the motivation to cooperate in an egoistic world. In order to prove that, we have a very nice game, and if we would be together now in person, we would have the following game. We would ask the students to sit together, two players always, and the players, they should play multiple times, and the game is you can choose option one or option two. Right? Without you know what option one and option two is at the moment, you would call one of the option and your opponent would do the same. And then you would look into the given points here in the table. So if player one would choose option one and player two would also go for option one, then you would see 3-3. The red color shows that the first player gets 3 points, and the blue color means also the second player gets 3 points. In this case, it doesn't matter because both the same numbers. If player one would have go for option two and player two for option one, you would see that player one would get 5 points and player two only 0 points. If you would see that both go for option two now, then both will get 1 point, right? Independent of the color, you see both 1 point. And if player one goes for option one and player two for option two, now this time player one gets 0 points and player two gets 5 points. The goal is to achieve more points, right? And the question is now, if you would play this repeatedly, you could sit together. You can even do it now via video. You call a friend and play the game. You would have the game sheet on your right. You put in your name, your opponent's name. You see your points, right? You can even go back, look at the other table. But these are the points you have. And we ask the students to sit there and say 1, 2, 3, and then call an option. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So these are the different options. And then you see what the opponent is doing, and then you see the number of points you get. You can agree on 30 times, 25 times, you play it. And the goal is to achieve as many points as you can do. So be aware your counterpart tries to do the same. So once you play the game, it's very interesting to see maybe how the strategy of you and your opponent is changing all the time. So play it with, you don't need even your students, you can even go with your family members. If you are bored in the times of Corona, just take the sheet and play the game. As I said, try to make as many points as possible. The player with the most points win is clear. And interesting is also the number of games you are playing, right? It will have, of course, an impact on the overall points, but try to get the mean value of that and look even with whom you played it and what happened with the points, right? Good. This is something we would have done normally in class, which would be, it's very fun to play, and we have different variants on that, and you can learn something about it. Something we cannot do now. Maybe we repeat this once we are back in the classroom. Now, what I would like to ask you to think about what the meaning of option one and option two is, right? And will this behavior of option one and option two, what you choose, your behavior, will this change with the number of games you are playing, right? And how does it look for different players? Maybe what happens with family members, what happens with peers like your students. Look into these things and let us know what you have learned about. Later, I will show you also a tool from NetLogo where you could even play it against a computer. It's not as much fun and it's not as interesting, but we'll come back to that. So please remember this picture. As this is all about cooperation, we can also look into nature, right? This is something very interesting to understand basic concepts of cooperation. And in order to understand what cooperation is doing, let's start with Darwin, right? Darwin wrote this book, Origin of the Species, and it's mostly about evolution, right? But evolution is some kind of competition where cooperation has a central role in this. Also, rivalry of resources plays a role. You will also understand it from the game you've played before, that rivalry is something in the game. And in evolution, it's not that you want to make a lot of points. Evolution, the goal is to have a large number of offsprings. And if it's possible, offsprings that have better fitness than yourself. How does it work? If you want to read it, there's the book, The Origin of Species. One of the most interesting quotes from the book, what I find, is that it's not the strongest or the most intelligent who will survive, but those who can best manage change. Charles Darwin. So something that also in this times very interesting. So if we think about evolution, and evolution is nothing else than an optimization strategy, then what does evolution do with, let's say, two individuals, two parents, as we call them, there's three dots here. And if you look at these circles, they are something like a mountain, right? An optimization question. The goal should be to move towards the top of the mountain, so to optimize towards this point. And yourself, you cannot do it because you're locked into your DNA, but your offsprings you can move them towards this thing. And there are two ways of doing this in biology. It's either mutation or recombination, and where recombination happens more often, mutation is only very seldomly. And after this happens, there's also a sort of selection, right? So let's look into these two parents here. And what you see here is these blue rings are the possible offsprings they can regenerate by recombination, right? Of course, they could even generate some mutations, but the offsprings will be on this circle. I just put here 4, and as you can see, these 4 offsprings are on different levels. So 2 offsprings have better fitness now, they're closer to the optimum, and the other 2 have more or less the fitness as their parents. As we assume there's some selection in it, like with animals, some animals get eaten. If you think about now how fast an animal is, if they are faster, the likelihood that they get eaten is less. So it's most likely that these offsprings will survive and the others will not. So what happens if you then see that the 2 offsprings here will survive? They will move towards the optimum. Why? Because if you think about other parents doing the same with the same fitness, they also push their offsprings towards the optimum. And if they also regenerate, and or among them, it doesn't matter, you see that the next offsprings are even moving closer to the optimal point, right? This is more or less a way to reach the point, but there are also other ways beside this kind of recombination. I also show you some mutations here. For example, if you look in history, the slavery the Roman Empire did, right? They did not really do this kind of fitness strategy. They just used other terms to get to the top of the mountain here, to optimize it. Another one is cooperation, where you can argue now if slavery is a form of cooperation, forced cooperation maybe. But we'll come to this later in the lecture. Now, I give you some examples that we found in nature. So the first one is a cheetah, right? The cheetah itself is the fastest animal on land. It can have speeds up to 120 kilometers per hour. And it's not here because it's a good collaborator. It shows that this animal, because it's so fast, it can catch in 50% of the times something to eat. So finding food in 50% of the times is very good, and it would be sufficient for this animal. And in evolution, it has evolved to become faster and faster and faster. And by that, you see the cat became not only faster, but also slimmer. The problem now is once the cheetah has found the food, it cannot protect it against other animals coming and stealing it. Against, for example, bigger lions. There are not so many lions, but there are others that coming to steal the food, and these are hyenas, for example. And the hyenas, they're not bigger than the cheetah, but they don't come alone, right? And here you see something what they are doing. If you compare the one cheetah against one hyena on this mountain example from before, the cheetah might be even closer to the optimum. But if the hyena is not coming alone, but in hundreds, at least 10 of them, they will steal the food from the cheetah. And that's one very interesting point in cooperation, right? So you can virtually boost yourself in this optimal optimization strategy by cooperation. I like it to show that what cooperation can do. I don't like that the very beautiful cheetah is losing against this really not so handsome hyenas, and they are the representators for cooperation now. But keep this in mind. So being together, it means being stronger, and this is an advantage. This means for the cheetah, because in evolution it becomes faster and faster, this trend, it's an evolutionary trap, which means these animals will die out over the long run. Good. Some other professionals for cooperation, it's the vampire bat. The Latin word is Desmundus rotundus, very cool name. And if you look at their cooperation strategies, it's quite interesting because bats, they live in very huge groups. And what they do is, at the night, they are going out hunting alone. And what they do is they're looking for blood in mammals. So they're not biting, but if an animal is injured, they're going close and they're zipping the blood. Horses or pigs are very interesting for them. Now, such an animal needs food every 60 hours, right? And the success rate of finding mammals that are caught and whatever is not there every 60 hours. So one bat alone had to die quite quickly. But the vampire is able to share blood, which means once they found a victim, they can sip more blood than they need for themselves, and bringing it back to the tribe where the others, maybe not so successful vampires, are waiting now, and they can exchange the blood. Don't ask me how they do it, but they can give back the blood. Now, the question is, to whom should they give it? They don't have enough blood, because there are a couple of hundreds in their tribe, to share it among all of them. So they have a dedicated plan to whom they should share it. And you might say maybe family members. That's not the way. They have a cooperative cluster, a term that you have seen before in the architecture and the topology of communication networks. But now they have some friends, some good strings, and they will try to feed them first if they were not successful. But they also would like to give it to not known vampire bats, because they would like to extend their cooperative cluster. Because the more bats are in your cluster, the more likely they will give something back to you. So they would like to give it also to others. And if they are asked by their own cooperative cluster, by somebody who was unsuccessful, asking, do you have something? They might still say no and try to give it to others instead of sharing it inside their group. But then the one that is unsuccessful might have doubts, and with the top of the nose dipping into the stomach, and with the ultrasound understanding if there's some bubbling noise. So they would like to try to find out if they really did not find something, or if they are cheating on them. And these are two things what you can see here from the vampire bat. One is really reciprocity. So you share with people you know, and sometimes you try to cheat on them. So the others need some means of detection to find out who are the cheaters. And once they find out there's a cheater, they cut them out of the cooperative cluster. So that is a very interesting game, and there are two rules now that you have learned: reciprocity and detection of cheaters. Also interesting are some tests from Franz de Waal. Is a guy in Atlanta, a professor who works with monkeys. And here's a very interesting example. What you see are the two monkeys in a cage, and they're separated by a wall in between them, but not really a wall. It's they can pass something in between, which is important later. And you see here some two bowls, right? And in the beginning of the test, they would put some grapes inside the bowl, and the monkeys would agree to pull the bar. And because there's a little bit of weight, one monkey alone could not pull it. So they have to pull together, and they learn if they both pull, they get the grapes. In a later stage, as you can see here, there's only one bowl with grapes and the other bowl is empty. Now, the one monkey that sees the bowls is pulling while the other one is not interested because there's nothing. So the one that would like to pull is asking the other side, please help me, right? He makes some noise running around in the cage until both are really pulling, and the monkey with the fruits in front of it is pulling out all the fruits. And if there are 10 fruits, afterwards, he would pass on some of the fruits to the helping monkey. And interesting is, if there are 10 of these fruits, you can ask yourself, how much of the fruits would the monkey give to the other side? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seems outrage, because why should he do it? If you do the test with people, with money, for example, where somebody can gain $10 if another one helps them, and the humans tend to give 2 euros of the 10 euros they won to the other side. In this case, the monkey will always give more than the half to the other side. So that is a very interesting thing, because monkeys, they believe in cooperation, and they pay off the other side to say, you have to believe in cooperation. Very interesting, a difference between people with ethics and animals. So this is something you can learn from them. And the other one is also, they have something like a tolerance in payoff. So they will accept that they don't win right away, but maybe on the long run, they might win. So this is something we call tolerance in payoff. There are other cooperation examples. Here is something on killer whales. So what they are doing, for example, is they are cooperating together to get a seal of the ice. You can see the seal on the ice, and the whales would never be able to reach it. So they have to wash it off the ice. And they're doing it by an orchestrated maneuver. One of the whales is staying next to the seal so that it's not running away, and orchestrating the other 4 orcas, there are 5 orcas in this example, in order to make a wave in a synchronized way. And I don't know something about who gets the food later on. If they share it, that would be very interesting. But here you see some very interesting thing, which is the synchronization of cooperating partners. We come back to that. So all in all, if we look into these examples from nature, and in the books I have presented you in the beginning, you can even find more of them. We can derive 5 main rules, or 5 main principles of cooperation. The first one is reciprocity. So that's what the vampire bat told us. The second one is detection and punishment of cheaters. Also the vampire bats showed us this. 3, maybe invest into future cooperation. And tolerance and payoff, right? There is also something that vampire and monkeys have together. And the last one is cognition of cooperation partners. So you have to recognize who is in your group. So the vampires have to understand with whom they should cooperate. So what is my cooperative cluster? And even the monkeys are doing this. They behave different in some of the tests of Franz de Waal, whether they know each other or they don't know. And therefore, we have 2 books. One is on cooperation and the other one is on cognition. I think that's very important, these 5 rules, and we always come back to this in the exam. So it's a very good idea to look into this slide again. Good. The next thing is cooperation strategies using evolutionary and game theory.